That's when you know you've hit rock bottom. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to On the Contrary, presented by PrizePicks. I'm Dave Loughran. On the Twitters at Loughy_D, ready to break everything down with you. 10-game slate. Finally got some bye weeks. You got a London game, a Sunday night, Monday night game, which leaves us with 10 games for the Sunday main slate. I'm joined, as always, by Alex Baker. You may know him as Awesemo, #1 ranked DFS player out there at Awesemo DFS. What's going on, brother? Week 6 already.
What's up, man? Yeah, this one has been a doozy so far. Like, just saw the injuries kind of coming in, and we got a lot of new plays this week. That should be pretty fun. I think it's going to be a good week. And
joined by Rich Hribar. Rich, is this the third time you've been with us now?
Yeah, I kind of make a yearly appearance every year. This is the third time.
I love it. Analyst at Sharp Football Analysis, some phenomenal stuff over there. I use it often as well. And just overall, one of the most sharp DFS and football analyst you're going to find. So happy to have you with us, Rich. And let's make the third time a good one, man.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's a beautiful Saturday here where I'm at. I've got to go to Home Depot after this little honey-do list. So, maybe a little Bed Bath & Beyond if there's time, but overall great Saturday.
What are you doing? Some home improvement stuff?
Well, you know, I'm like 30 minutes west of Cleveland, so the weather's starting to turn here. So I'm starting to prep getting rid of all the patio stuff, winterizing all the patio stuff. So I
boarding up your windows.
Got to get a few bungee cords and S hooks and start taking the pergola stuff down and yeah.
Yeah, I just put a sunshade up and it was drooping, so I put a cable with some eye hooks. And I'm out there looking at it now. I'm thinking there's no way this lasts through November at all. So yeah, winterization's coming for sure. Anyway, happy to have you with us, man. And happy to have all of you guys with us as well. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Simple. Only takes a second. And subscribe to the channel too. We're almost at 62,000 subs, chugging along here during the NFL season. We got basketball coming up next week already. Alex, as you said, just as we got into the swing of things for football, basketball's hitting us. But I mean, it really is the greatest time of year. We're going to have Thanksgiving Day football. It doesn't get better than that unless you've got Christmas Day basketball. So the golden months of DFS are upon us almost.
Dude, the best part of NBA and NFL happening at the same time is that no one tries as hard at NFL. They're not studying up all the week.
Oh, is that how it works?
Well, yeah, you can see it on YouTube and stuff. The only problem is we're not spending as much time on NFL either.
Right.
Well, NBA is like a grind. You got to be there. In a game lock. I can never do it because, being at home at 7 p.m. Eastern every time is just you'd be dialed in at that hour.
It's tough. It's you have kids, right?
Yeah, 3.
Yeah. I have 1 and I'm already dreading what it's going to be like once you get to that 5, 6, 7 o'clock PM time. But we'll make it there. And if you are someone that loves football as much as we do, these shows aren't going anywhere. On the contrary, the 4-hour live stream on Sunday, the strategy show every single day of the week. So be sure to check that out. Hang with us, whether you're playing basketball or football or whatever. By the way, Jordan, we need to get some Halloween beats dropped for the intro. All right, let's come up with some good stuff. Get seasonal on us. All right. Make something happen. And by the way, you can follow Rich at Lord Reeves on Twitter. You see the handle right under his name. So go ahead and do that. All right, let's dive into this, fellas. A little strategy talk first. Rich, as our guest, I'll kick it off with you. You mentioned something yesterday when you tweeted about being on the show that this is pretty much the most wide open slate of the season. What do you mean by that? Is it the flat ownership? Is it the fact that there's only 10 games, no real mega chalk outside of Kareem Hunt? What do you think of?
Pretty much all encompassing. We have the start of bye week, so we remove a few guys from the board. It's the first main slate without Derrick Henry, which is, so now he'll have his 14-point game for us, probably off the main slate for everyone that's kind of not really wanted to pay up for the high sticker price that he's been just delivering. He has the most touches through NFL history through 5 games. So he's off the main slate. We've had all these running back injuries. It feels like a starting running back has gone down, and multiple starting running backs have gone down every week. Even this week we've got Saquon is out. Now now that David Montgomery's out, his incumbent Damian Williams is going to be on COVID list. We've just got so many guys. Clyde Edwards-Helaire got hurt on Sunday night, and he's going to be out. So Darrell Williams is locked into like these really cheap prices. So it's just everything kind of put together. It's going to make ownership kind of flat, like you said. And we've got some kind of unique plays and a lot of questionable guys too. And, a lot of players don't like clicking guys with the Q next to their name. They just don't like doing it. I don't know if they like a lot of that. They don't want to deal with the variance. They're not going to be on the late swap. They're just not going to be dialed in. So we've got a lot of Qs in the player pool this week.
Alex, does your player pool personally shrink when you've got these smaller slates, or is it just all dependent on how many good plays there are each week? Because it feels like there's a lot of really good plays despite having 3 fewer games than we've had in 4 of the 5 weeks this season.
Definitely. I mean, there's a ton of value this week, especially a running back. We haven't seen that yet. So that's going to make it easier to have higher exposure to certain players. The 10 games is still a pretty large slate. I mean, I think of other sports like NBA where a large slate is like 8 games. So like this is there's a ton of options. I think the ownership is going to be pretty spread out aside from some obvious plays. So there should be a lot of different ways to slice the apple here.
All right. So, Rich, you already teased this a little bit. Kareem Hunt, it's Kareem Hunt chalk week. We saw some of that last year, and it's amazing because he finished as the RB10 in PPR leagues, but it felt like the games where Nick Chubb was out, he was kind of pedestrian at best. I know he didn't kill us, but it wasn't like monster performances in a backfield that runs the ball 30 plus times per game, which you would have expected. This year, Nick Chubb's the RB11. Kareem Hunt is the RB6, and that's with Nick Chubb being healthy through the first 5 games. Obviously, this shows on the contrary, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you fade good players just because they're getting ownership. How do we approach Kareem Hunt in tournaments this week?
Yeah, Kareem Hunt's in an interesting spot here. You talked about, first of all, just naturally, he's on a heater right now in fantasy football anyways. 155, 86, 89 yards from scrimmage the past 3 weeks, 13 catches in those games. He had 4 touchdowns. What's interesting about him is he actually has a lower percentage of his team's backfield touches than Cordero Patterson does, who everyone in kind of the fantasy community is like, you got to get rid of him. He's not getting the ball enough, but he actually has a fewer amount of backfield touches than him. That's going to change this week. Last year, when Nick Chubb was out, he had 82% of the Cleveland backfield touches, 75 of 92 touches. We've got Cleveland as a home favorite against a team that is giving up the most explosive rushing yardage in the NFL. The Browns are number 1 in that department. Arizona's 31st. They've allowed 4.8 carries of 10 or more yards per game. They've been kind of gouged on the run when teams can stay in game script and run on them. So that's kind of in play. Everything just lines up for him. The touches are there. He catches the football. He's a home favorite, and he's facing a team that hasn't stopped the run so far. Kind of checks every box. The one unique thing I think about this game is right now the Cleveland Browns have scored 16 offensive touchdowns. Just 4 have been passing. So 75% of touchdowns have been rushing. NFL base rate is 62% passing touchdowns. There's going to be a time where this season, whether it be this week or upcoming, where this oscillates back. Last year, the Browns, 56% of their touchdowns were via the pass. So even if you want to the Browns are unique because they run the football. There's going to be a week where we're going to get like a 3 to 4 touchdown Baker Mayfield game because no team's going to rush for 75% of offensive touchdowns over the course of a full NFL season.
For sure. No, good points. And you mentioned too that Hunt saw 82% of the carries last year with Chubb out. He also saw 100% of running back carries in the red zone. So that's good. I think Andy Janovich saw 1 and Baker Mayfield saw 2, but among running backs, Alex, it was all Kareem Hunt in the red zone. And he's already somebody that's been piling up goal line carries despite the presence of Nick Chubb.
Yeah, he's averaged like 18 points a game this year. I saw you put it on our sheet. He's RB6, and that's in a timeshare. So man, that's just insane. I do wonder, like last year when he was the RB1 while Chubb was injured, that was weeks 7 through 9.
I think 5 through 9, and there was a bye in there.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. So he never rushed more than 20 times in the game, which was really surprising. I guess they just must not have been in rushing game scripts. But I'm also about to pull up the rushing percentages from last year because maybe that's maybe they're gonna pass a little bit more with Chubb out to play the strengths of the team a little bit more. So does look like in week 6 through 9, they averaged about 44% passing in neutral game scripts. I guess that's not a huge difference. So kind of an interesting thing to think about, but they've averaged like 36 points for the running backs so far this year. So, I mean, there's like no way to approach this where Hunt doesn't look like an absolute like smash play.
Yeah, I know. It's so tough to get away with it. I was actually going to save this for later in the show. They're averaging what? The team is averaging, I think, over 30 rushing attempts per game, Rich. So that's, I'm sorry, 35 rushing attempts per game for Cleveland this year. Alex, you may have mentioned that and I missed it, but I wanted to say this for later, but it's probably a good time to just get there, Rich, especially given that you were talking about the amount of rushing touchdowns they have. How do we approach an Odell Beckham this week? How do we look to Jarvis if he does return? This game's total, from what I'm seeing, opened at 54. It's down to 48.5, which is pretty significant drop. I mean, it's caved in.
Yeah, well, we had a little bit of wind scare. We've also got a little bit of COVID news with the Cardinals throughout the week. And then obviously Cliff Kingsbury's not going to be there. So you've got a team without their head coach. So yeah, everyone's been kind of banging the under a little bit. And obviously Chubb is out too. So, I mean, I don't really think that really matters so much for the game total because, you know, you said you're going to plug in, you know, another running back that's still capable of production. Odell has been quite a curious case with the Browns. You know, we've been on this a couple times. You know, 2 weeks ago, he was in an absolute just smash spot and, you know, the prayer yards were all over the field.
I loved them. I loved them that week, and it just was a disaster.
And it should have been there. The process, I don't think, was wrong. Now, last week, it's interesting. People say, "Oh, he was an 89-point total game and really wasn't targeted and really didn't do anything in a game where Baker Mayfield also threw for 300 yards." Obviously, the peripherals aren't great on that. But if you look at the Chargers in general, their whole defense is predicated on stopping the vertical pass and, you know, shutting down perimeter wide receivers. Literally nobody's done anything against them so far through 5 weeks, even outside of Odell Beckham, Tyreek Hill, Terry McLaurin, you know, Henry Ruggs. No one's done anything against them. And we'll probably talk about them when we talk about the Ravens game a little bit. But now we've got a 26-game sample with Odell Beckham on the Cleveland Browns, and he's got 2 100-yard receiving games in 10 games with fewer than 50 receiving yards. I mean, the price is as cheap as you probably, this is as cheap as I can ever remember Odell Beckham being on both sites. So, I mean, you've got that going for you. You've got the element, like I said, there's going to be a time where the Browns have to have passing touchdowns. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a blind faith, but I mean, the price is, it's not going to get any better.
I feel like there has to become a time too, where Baker Mayfield can connect on a deep ball with Odell Beckham. I mean, Alex, he has 7 targets or 7 deep ball targets already this year. Every single week he's out there. Baker Mayfield's airing it out. Rich mentioned prayer yards. He's airing it out to him every single week. Like, why can't we just get that one game where Beckham has 150 and 2?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not counting on it to be honest. Like,
I don't know how you can.
Yeah, this is a league where I feel like people decline in performance pretty quick, and he hasn't been good in a while. If Landry comes back this week, also he commands a pretty big target share usually, so I'm going to be keeping an eye out for his status because he's supposed to be activated off the IR, but they don't have to play him this week, so that's something to watch out for.
All right, what are you looking towards this game as one that you're stacking? I mean, Kareem Hunt's going to be popular. Presumably, we're all going to have a lot of him anyway. But do you look towards either side of this one as a spot that we can load up on the passing attack?
I think, I mean, it's not my favorite game by any means. Cleveland is a very run-heavy team so far this year, 50% in neutral game scripts. That's way over the league average. So it's kind of tough to stack it up and expect them to pass at high volume unless Arizona also has a huge game. Certainly possible, but that's just one more thing that has to go right. So I feel like we can find a lot better spots here.
What about the other side of this game, Rich?
Yeah, this game is interesting. Also, we have the element this week in particular where our 4 p.m. games, our late swap games are really just this. Then you've got Cowboys, Patriots, and the Patriots never have a lot of steam, their players. And then you've got Broncos, Raiders. So in terms of, you know, late swap options, I mean, this is kind of the game. And then perhaps the Dallas offense where we can have salary, kind of flexibility to kind of make these roster moves if, our 1 p.m. chalky guys don't hit. So there's kind of a nice little game theory element with the way the slate plays out too, because no one's going to have a lot of Broncos. No one's going to really have a lot of Raiders outside of Darren Waller, and really no one's going to have a lot of Patriots guys. So it's kind of like, if you want to tie up salary and give yourself some outs, you kind of have to stick some of these guys into some of your player pools, whether it be DeAndre Hopkins, obviously Kareem Hunt, Kyler Murray. Then you've got, like I said, Waller, Zeke, and the Cowboys wide receivers, to where you have roster flexibility to kind of make some of these moves when we hit that 4 p.m. hour, and we got to make those adjustments midday Sunday. So I do kind of like DeAndre Hopkins a little bit. The problem is I just don't know how much we're capable of getting like the 30-point DeAndre Hopkins game anymore. The ancillary guys in the Arizona offense are just a lot better than they were last year. So we've seen him. He isn't at a game with double-digit targets yet. He had 9 such games with double-digit targets last year. His target share has bounced back, though, 32% last week, 24% the week before. Cleveland is dead last in the NFL in points allowed to opposing wide receiver ones through 5 weeks. Tyreek Hill got him for 11 for 197 and 1. Brandon Cooks 9 for 78 and 1. The only guy they stopped was Allen Robinson for 2 for 27 when the Bears had 1 net passing yard in that game. But Justin Jefferson 684 and 1, and then Big Mike last week 8 165 and 2. Those outside perimeter boundary wide receivers, those alphas, have had a lot of success against the Browns so far. But like I said, the ancillary guys for the Cardinals have been a lot more productive than they were in the last year with DeAndre Hopkins there. They're going to run a lot more 4 wide receiver personnel this week because Zach Ertz is not eligible to play. When Mac Williams left the game last week, they went up to 0. They went up to 10 personnel, 28% of their offensive snaps, which was a season high. So we'll probably see them run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, which also can cannibalize some of your alpha targets. When you pay up for DeAndre Hopkins, we want to be able to run into those games where you can have 12 to 14 targets and really kind of lift the lid and blow open kind of the salary you're paying up for him. And I'm not sure if that really is in the range of outcomes for him this year.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing for me, Alex. It's like DeAndre Hopkins feels like a good contrarian play, but then maybe you can shed some light on this when it comes to what makes a good contrarian play. Like, look at the guys he's priced around, right? McLaurin has a 30% target share. He's got the Chiefs this week. Carolina, you get DJ Moore. He's got a near 30% target share this season. Cooper Kupp's at like 100% target share. In all seriousness, though, 33%. All of these guys are getting a ton of looks every week. You're talking like averaging double digits almost for these guys. Is it worthwhile saying, you know what, DeAndre Hopkins will be lower owned? Maybe this is the week where he can reach double-digit targets and have that big explosive game?
Yeah, he's definitely intriguing as a contrarian option. The price really is based on last year's production, though. He's averaged 15.6 points per game, and he's 7.8K on DraftKings, for instance. That's only 2x when they usually price guys at 2.4x. So it's quite overpriced. The other thing I'm thinking is Cleveland is pretty much the worst weather split for Arizona there is. They play in a dome, then they're going to Cleveland where there's wind. That's going to make all their passing production that you've been used to look a lot worse. So this definitely doesn't seem like a great time to get Hopkins. But whenever you have a wide receiver projected for 70 yards, that definitely has some blowout potential.
So, Rich, the Chiefs this week become a little bit easier to stack than we've seen in the past. Our top stack tool has them with a 17.3% top stack probability, which is once again the highest. Just to be clear, every single week the Chiefs are going to have the highest top stack probability, and probably still, which is amazing, the highest leverage score and one of the best value scores, because they're just, it's just that good. I know last week was ugly on Sunday night, but when you look at Travis Kelce's price, he's the cheapest he's been all year by a mile. Very simply, I guess this is the easiest way to ask you. I wouldn't ask you, do you like the Chiefs this week? Because if you don't against Washington, you're crazy. But do you like the Chiefs in tournaments, given what we're seeing and now that they're going to be a little bit easier to stack?
Yeah, it's always kind of the cat and mouse game. And I think with the ownership being kind of flat this week too, I mean, there's not really a huge problem eating some of the Chiefs chalk. The problem is, we don't really see Tyreek and Kelce kind of go bananas together. It's kind of usually when Tyreek has these 50-point bombs, like, Kelsey's not really coming along for the ride. So he tends to have not floor games for him, because the floor game for Travis Kelce is really good in the context of the tight end position. But it's interesting to see who kind of wins out in the duel of fates there, because Washington has just been so bad against the vertical pass so far this season. Look at them right now. They've just been melted in terms of passing points per game. They're on 22.5 passing points per game. That's 31st. They've had top 5 quarterbacks in every game but one so far this season. And they've allowed 30 or more points in their past 3 games. They've also trailed for the highest rate of snaps in the NFL this season, more than the Jets, more than the Jaguars, more than the Lions, these teams that don't have any wins. So it's a complete disaster. 31st in receptions allowed to wide receivers, 28th in receiving yards allowed to wide receivers, 27th in fantasy points allowed per target on throws over 15 yards downfield. There's not a metric that shows Washington is a good defense against bad offenses, let alone an elite offense like Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well, Alex. And sitting at 2-3 in the basement of the NFC West, going to Washington, it really feels like a game where the Chiefs will rack up points. We saw it against inferior defenses. They've annihilated them. So I don't really look at last Sunday as much of anything. What about you when it comes to the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill? I think he's going to play. Travis Kelce, Mahomes, even Mecole Hardman.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like a great spot. You have a team that has a very low rush rate, and with Clyde Edwards-Helaire out, like, you're not expecting that to change anytime soon. So we know that Hill and Kelce are slate breakers every single week, so this is definitely no exception. Beyond that, it gets a little bit trickier. I might stack up Darrell Williams if I'm playing Mahomes. With Helaire out, I think he's going to be the guy that, if they have a big performance through the air, maybe he's the one that's closing it out and getting a lot of the rushing attempts over Jared McKinnon, who is more of a passing downs guy. So besides that, Mecole Hardman, his playing time hasn't been great so far this year. He's averaging about 2/3 of snaps. And Byron Pringle is like 1/3. So McCall, and Robinson, he's only gotten targeted 6% of the time he's been out on the field, which is abysmal. So there's really not anything to get too excited about besides Hill and Kelce, in my opinion.
Rich, do you agree, or do you look at Hardman and say, maybe he only has a 15% target share, but he's on arguably, one of the most efficient offenses out there or ever? Or is this basically just a 2 top guys thing for you? Because I'm thinking maybe there's a way to get different here without still getting exposure to the Kansas City stack without having to go all top guys, or maybe that's just not the right move. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, those are the salary relief guys, Darrell and Hardman. I mean, I've never gotten Hardman ever right in DFS. So, I mean, prayers up to everyone that is going to go down that road. He did have a career high 12 targets last week, if you want to kind of latch onto that.
Yeah.
So there's something to build on. We'll see what happens. Josh Gordon only played 9 total snaps. Everyone is waiting for him to see him on the field again, because Josh Gordon has a lot of truthers out there. So maybe, like I said, if he's going to be on the field that much and a team that's going to score that many points, I'm not going to discount really anybody and say that they can't hit for you, especially for the salary relief that it can provide. So, I mean, I don't really have a problem if anyone wants to go down that road. Darrell Williams is kind of tricky because he's so cheap, like, 4.9 on DK, 5.2 on FanDuel. He is their only 2 traditional carries inside the 5-yard line this season, when they don't run all that goofy motion or do anything like normal or abnormal. When they actually run a real running play, it's been him both times. So he could potentially get a touchdown, maybe even multiple touchdowns. We'll see. He was targeted 5 times last week too, and he ran more pass routes than Jerick McKinnon. So there's an opportunity there. I think it's going to be an absolute bananas Mahomes game. I really think Mahomes is going to throw like 4 or 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, and maybe 400 yards. I mean, it just could be an explosive performance. Shamwell says, thought we were supposed to get shout outs with this monthly thing. There's your shout out, pal. Badge looks good on you. I've shouted you out 100 times before you even have the badge. Avi, thank you for the super chat. Says, can you rate the Moors on the site? Alex, he wants you to rate. I mean, that can't be a serious question, but DJ Moore, Rondell Moore, Chris Moore. How's that for you? All right. The other side of this game, though, to me is is equally interesting, Alex, because you've got Terry McLaurin, again, monster target share, and he's beat up bad defenses. Rich was talking about how bad Washington's secondary is. Kansas City, man, this is Daniel Sorensen. I don't know how much longer you keep the guy on the field. Tyrann Mathieu might just kill him, but if he doesn't and he keeps playing, how much? I mean, they're in bad shape in both phases of the defense on the ground and through the air.
Yeah, sorry, which team are we on here?
The Washington.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think we got some big news with Washington that Curtis Samuel's out. So finally, we don't have to roster him, only for him to play like 4% of the game. So that's definitely making it easier to look at Washington. I think we're looking at probably trying to run it back with some pass catchers. So the one guy, I mean, McLaurin's obvious. He's a great play. The other guy I'm looking at, I don't feel great about this, but Ricky Seals-Jones. He's averaged 85% of dropbacks running a route last 2 weeks. He's been targeted 15% of those. So that's not like that far off of where Logan Thomas was, to be honest. Obviously a downgrade, but the playing time is almost the same. And I think that he's going to be like pretty sneaky this week. We have him at 9% ownership and a 16% chance of being in the optimal on our boom bust tool. So he really stands out as a great play.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of different directions you can take here, Rich. I think we could probably talk about the whole stress fracture and Antonio Gibson's shin. Still got 20 carries last week, albeit 20 inefficient carries. Got in the end zone a couple of times, but McLaurin's been great. And Taylor Heineke, to be fair, really hasn't been that bad from a fantasy standpoint.
No, I mean, Taylor Heineke now has made, 5 starts with Washington, and he's had over 20 or more fantasy points in all but one. If you count the playoff game last year, too, he played. Last week was kind of his one kind of real hiccup. And, he'd been flirting with danger for a couple of weeks before that, too.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, he always makes a couple plays per game where you're like, don't do that, man. And then he gets away with it. But yeah, I mean, listen, everyone against the Chiefs, this is a smoke 'em if you got them game, really. I mean, the Chiefs have allowed 30 or more points in 4 straight games. The first time in franchise history they've done that. They're allowing their games featuring the Chiefs are averaging 64 points per game. That's second in the NFL. Washington's fourth in that category. They're both 32nd and 31st in scoring rate allowed per drive in the NFL per possession. So, I mean, you're going to have to find plays that you don't want to play in this game because you're going to be able to objectively talk yourself into anyone. Maybe the most contrarian way is Antonio Gibson, just because we've seen him be able to get scripted out in his role. We know he occupies the 2-down role, and when they're a neutral game script, he still had 22 touches last week. Like you said, inefficient against the Saints defense. A little softer matchup here against the Chiefs defense that's 26th in yards per carry allowed to running backs, but they also face the 6th fewest attempts because they typically get out to leads. And Gibson is 24th among all running backs in route participation per team drop back, because that's J.D. McKissick's job. So a lot of people might say, well, we've got a Chiefs, a 7-point favorite. They're going to run away. They'll script Gibson out, but we know Gibson says the goal line carries. Maybe he's the most contrarian way to go at this game with your Chiefs stacks and bring him back. I've not looked at his kind of projected ownership. Ricky Seals-Jones is definitely going to get a lot of steam. Just for not only did he have the pure snap and target volume, he had 3 end zone targets as well. He also had a 30-yard pass come back due to penalty, and the Chiefs are 32nd in yards per target allowed to opposing tight ends. As a game theory play, do we go with the chalky tight end? Is the chalky tight end ever the move? What's the opinion there?
I mean, he's played 144 of 145 snaps since Logan Thomas went down, so that kind of is at least appealing, Alex. But I guess you're the best man to answer this question. Do we go with the chalky tight end in a phenomenal matchup on a team that's decimated in pass catching, or do we look elsewhere?
Well, I think he's going to be really popular for guys that really follow this closely, because he hasn't had a big performance yet. He's only averaged 4.4 fantasy points per game per the draft screen. So, I mean, if someone's really scrolling down at tight end and they kind of like have been paying a lot of attention, they might gravitate towards him. But I feel like for the most part, like, since he hasn't had that breakout game yet, I don't think he's going to be like over-owned quite yet, even though what Rich was saying about them giving up a ton of fantasy points to tight ends is a good one, because like they do show that they're 31st against the tight end position on the apps.
I mean, we have him at 9% right now, Rich. If Ricky Seals-Jones comes in around that even like 10 to 12% range, I'm pretty okay with that.
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. 3K,
I guess
3K, I have to imagine he's gonna be the cash game lock at 3K on DraftKings. Even 5K at FanDuel is basically almost for his role. You just take that and go with it.
Yeah, it feels like I haven't made lineups yet. I would imagine 7K Kelsey probably gets a lot of interest as well. But yeah, we'll see where that plays out. Ultimately, this game is the highest total on the slate. It's going to be pretty popular, and I think for good reason. There was a comment in chat though, Rich, about playing Kansas City defense as leverage. Do you have any interest in doing something like that and just hoping that Taylor Heineke is terrible?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with it. I mean, there's been a lot of work done on this where you have games that feature so many dropbacks. And even if the game goes and it shoots out, like the Chiefs can still give up a bunch of points and score defensive touchdowns because you have so many dropbacks, sacks, turnovers, potential for a touchdown. There's ways to get there outside of just points allowed, which is mostly what people pick defenses on or just based on the opposing offense. So there's still a way to get there from a lot of studies. Remember a couple years ago when the Chiefs played the Rams in the game that had 100 points? Both defenses got there in fantasy because they had defensive touchdowns. So
that's crazy.
There's ways. I mean, there's ways to get there in DFS outside of, points allowed. We want the dropbacks, those high dropback games.
All right, Alex, Joe Mixon is expected to get back to a normal workload this week. Before last week, where he was clearly limited, although he touched the ball on like 65% of the snaps he was on the field for, he just played a limited amount of snaps. Joe Mixon is expected to get back to normal workload. He was second in running back carries going into week 5 behind Derrick Henry, who has, close to 1,000 already. Is he this week coming in around 10% ownership, assuming he gets a normal workload against the Detroit team that's been gutted by, like, their pass defense is bad, but teams know they can just run on them, and they've done that. Madison had a huge game. Of course, he had a passing touchdown or receiving touchdown. But we've seen a lot of running backs carve them up. What do you do with Joe Mixon this week, assuming that he's not limited?
Well, I think Mixon is definitely intriguing. Since he's been kind of limited, I think people might be a little scared off, and we've seen the reports that he's going to be a full go this week. So that's definitely encouraging. This is we have him projected for about 20 touches and 80 yards. So that's definitely a solid projection. And the game script versus Detroit, gotta imagine there's a fair chance that works out really well for Mixon. They're only a 3.5 point favorite though. So there's a pretty decent chance it gets away from Mixon as well. And he isn't very active in the receiving game, only averaging about half routes. So I feel good about him. This is a week where you have some really amazing running back plays. And I don't think based on the price, he's quite at that echelon, but definitely someone to have interested in tournaments.
Yeah, Rich, what about you with Mixon, and how much of an impact does it have for you if Samaje Perine remains out with that? Well, not remains out, but isn't able to play about being on the COVID-19 reserve list?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting tournament guy for sure, just because there's a lot of fragility. Like, Alex kind of alluded to, he's not really catching any passes. He's not really even his route participation has gone down too, even in his full games. We go back to that Thursday night game, and he's not being targeted. The ball's just going to those 3 wide receivers, basically. Those guys have accounted for almost 80% of the team targets. Those 3, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Tyler Boyd. So we need those receptions really to kind of have a huge game, but we can also run into a few touchdown game here for Joe Mixon. 74% of the touchdowns scored against the Lions so far have been by running backs so far in the season. The next closest team is at 58%. So, there'll probably be some recoil there over the course of the season, but they have just been letting a lot of running backs get in the box. So if you want to chase a couple touchdown game, I think this is a really good spot for it. And a lot of people, I think, will be going to go back to the run back of Burrow and Jamar Chase. It's obviously a really great spot for Jamar Chase from not just from a point chasing stance, but also from the Lions are one of the worst teams in the NFL against the deep ball. They've allowed a 54% completion rate on downfield targets. That's 27th. They're 30th in yards allowed per catch on those targets. So that's where Jamar Chase has been living. He has caught 8 of 13 targets over 15 yards downfield. The rest of the Bengals just 2 of 8. That's been his game, so he keeps running hot. DraftKings has been real kind of slow to price up Ja'Marr Chase. They finally bumped him up a little bit this week, but they've been real slow the first 5 weeks to up his pricing.
Well, let's stay on that topic for a second, because Ja'Marr Chase getting some ownership. He's towards the top, but it makes sense. Like you said, he's probably still underpriced. What about guys like T. Higgins, who returned last week, or Tyler Boyd, who really isn't getting deep targets, but can be involved? T. Higgins has 3 red zone targets, or I think actually 3 inside to 10, I believe, this season in only 3 games. Are you looking to some of these secondary options, not named Ja'Marr Chase, in the passing game to potentially get a little different?
I mean, I've got some seasonal leagues that are waiting on T. Higgins to do some things.
Yeah.
The big bummer about T. Higgins is if you look at his role last year compared to this year, it's still a small sample because he missed two games, but his depth of target is just 6.8 yards. As a rookie, it was 13 yards. So Ja'Marr Chase is taking up all those vertical targets we were getting peppered in with T. Higgins, because the great thing about T. Higgins was he was getting vertical targets and end zone targets, and now he's only getting 1. He's only getting those inside the 10 targets that you talked about. We need to start seeing him get some more of those vertical targets. He's super cheap though. And eventually we're going to hopefully see that, the depth of target bounce back, because he's that type of archetype, right? Like, you want to give him one-on-one contested catch, downfield targets like he had as a rookie. But yeah, 6.8 targets, yards per target as the depth of target. We need more. We need a little more juice there.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Alex, what about you for the rest of the Cincy team against the Detroit team that's really allowed some huge fantasy performances all season?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cincinnati looks like a pretty good team to stack up. Now, they did have an abnormally low rushing percent last week, but that coincided with Mixon being limited. So I'm kind of like trying to figure out how much of that is that correlation, or are they just looking to pass the ball more, as they've had good results with that. But all the individual plays look really good. Chase has been phenomenal. He even has positive leverage at 14% ownership in our tools. And then Higgins and Boyd, both very reasonable options as well. I think this one's a good stack target because they have 4 different guys you can play, counting Uzomah. I think when you stack up Joe Burrow, like the amount of lineups that are going to have that same combination of players is going to be lower. So that's definitely something I'm factoring in. The only trouble is it's tough to love anyone on the Detroit side to run back.
Yeah. What about Swift?
Swift would be the one guy that you feel confident in. He's been kind of having a workload that's very volatile, so that can be a good thing in fantasy, because if you get him on that day where it's higher than normal, then obviously that's gonna give him more upside. So if the price is pretty high, there are much better plays this week when you look at like Kareem Hunt, for instance, but certainly a guy that has tremendous upside.
Rich, what are we doing with Khalil Herbert now that Damian Williams isn't playing? Like, is there interest there at a guy coming off an 18 carry week against the Raiders?
I think there's interest in tournaments a little bit, but it's this weird spot, right? So he only ran 1 pass route last week. They're dogs against the Packers team that could get away from them. Like we've seen the Bears basically try to hide their passing game 2 weeks in a row. Get out to a lead and then just kind of turtle. I mean, are they going to be able to do that here? I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because will there be the kind of necessary, prerequisite rush volume? Now, he is a guy that, his nickname is Juice. So he actually has a lot of big playability. He did, he was a transfer from Kansas. He went to Virginia Tech in the 2020 season in college last year. Of all college players, not even guys in the draft class that had 100 more touches, he led all of them in yards per touch. So he can create some big plays for you as well. So those chunk gains. But I mean, there's a lot of volatility, because I think there's a lot of volatility inherently with this Bears offense right now, because we don't really know exactly what we have. They're not going to probably bully the Packers around on the scoreboard this week like they did the past 2 weeks against the Raiders and Lions. And then we haven't really seen this offense operate under Justin Fields in like a game script where they have to catch up and provide any type of offensive leverage for us at all. So like there's definitely a lot of risk involved.
Sure. That's what I was wondering. Like if Williams is out, obviously Montgomery's on the IR, and Khalil Herbert, like you said, ran one passing route last week. Who would it be if not for him this week, given that Tariq Cohen's still not on the field?
Not Ryan Nall.
Right, exactly. I don't know who it would be. This is the thing. Could he be out there for 95% of snaps?
Yeah, it's believable.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alex. And then, by the way, I'm not sitting here acting like I like him a lot this week. I don't know who else is in the backfield to really to get carries or touches this week.
I'm down for Khalil Herbert for sure. So we actually saw this last year. David Montgomery missed 1 week. It was week 11. And in that game, Cordarrelle Patterson ran the ball 10 times and Ryan Nall only ran the ball once. So Cordarrelle Patterson is not a guy until he got to Atlanta that was really an option that was preferred. So to me, that just showed like how deprioritized Ryan Nall is on the depth chart for Chicago. He's just a special teams player for the most part, where Khalil Herbert, we saw him get the rushing attempts last week. So I do feel very confident that he's going to be out there a ton. He's dirt cheap. So the only thing is, they're most likely going to be in a tough game script for Green Bay, but he's cheap enough where I'm willing to take that shot anyway.
What are you doing with Rodgers and Adams on the other side of this one, Alex? And I guess Aaron Jones as well.
I think Rodgers is definitely a intriguing play this week, the stack with Adams, because Adams is getting a good amount of ownership, justifiably so. But Rodgers, we only have about 2% ownership. So people really aren't digging this stack on our top stack. So it's free this week. We have them at 8% chance of being the top stack, although it is the most expensive stack, basically. So I think that's pretty intriguing. The one breakout candidate I'm kind of looking at on the Packers, in addition to like the usuals, is Allen Lazard. He's in a spot where he's getting the routes. He was out there 90% of the routes last week. He's only gotten targeted 6% of the time, though. That's down a lot from 16% last year. So he hasn't done anything, but he's the only other guy that's really getting huge playing time. So I could see it working out.
Are you getting to those stacks this week at all, Rich?
It's tough. Listen, you can always play Devontae Adams. There's no pushback there. So look at this from the last 3 weeks with Justin Fields under center. The Bears wide receivers in total have 35 targets, 19 catches, and 299 yards. For comparison, Devontae Adams himself has 45 targets, 29 catches, and 402 yards. It's pretty bananas, the split there. And teams know Devontae Adams is getting targeted, and they can't do a damn thing about it. Like he's open. They're scheming him up so amazingly because they, like Alex kind of said, they're not really even throwing the ball to anybody else, and they're still able to get him, all these open looks. And him and the chemistry as Rodgers are just really it's unparalleled right now in the league. They keep giving up like these long drives, even last week, the field goal was missed, but he's getting the ball. There's 30 seconds in regulation, and they're still able to connect on like a 26-yard pass over the middle to set up that missed field goal. It's a dude, just put 6 guys on him, let someone else beat you. But yeah, you can always roll out Devontae Adams and not really have, any type of really concern about a floor. I'm really curious about what's going on with Aaron Jones, though, because we've seen Aaron Jones be able to break slates too. Like he's been able to have these games where he has 3 or 4 touchdowns, and he had the one on Monday night this year, but we've seen him start to concede some touches to AJ Dillon the past 2 weeks. After weeks 2 and 3, where he had 75% of the backfield touches, he just had 53% and then 58% last week. And we also saw AJ Dillon last week start to get some green zone touches, which we don't like. You don't want to start seeing that where Aaron Jones started to give away some of those inside the 10 touches. But Aaron Jones, I feel like is one of these guys that's just been kind of meandering through the season because one game kind of came on Monday night, but like no one is really rostering him. But he definitely is still capable of being one of these guys that turns in a 2 to 3 touchdown game.
Yeah, I think so as well. Let me ask you this, because I want to hit on some other stuff here, Rich. With the Chargers and Ravens, a lot of people are looking at the Chargers from last week. You mentioned it earlier, 89 total points in that game. And just assuming that we're going to see more of this, just kind of par for the course with them in Cleveland. Have we overreacted to the outcome of that game going into week 6 now for teams like the Chargers?
I mean, we always do a little bit anyways, right? We do. Fantasy football has always been a game where it chases its tail a little bit. I will say, though, that the Chargers are just they have such the look of an elite offense. You know, Brandon Staley and that team, Herbert's just been in his bag so far to start the year, that they're going to be hard to stop for a lot of defenses, you know? So, I mean, when you can't stop anybody, you're going to play in like some higher scoring games. So, I mean, that offense is going to just naturally kind of involve teams to have to kind of chase them a little bit. I think this particular matchup, though, is very intriguing because we're coming off Lamar Jackson having another great primetime spot. But it's kind of a strength for strength matchup because where Lamar has won all season is in the vertical passing game. And that's exactly what the Brandon Staley's defense has been designed to do, going back even to when he was with the Rams last year. And it's completely carried over to how the Chargers play defense right now. They give you a ton of light boxes. They want to invite you to run, right? And teams that have acquiesced, they've run down the Chargers' throat in every game. But the interesting thing about the Ravens is they haven't been able to run the football with anyone outside of Lamar Jackson and Tyson Williams, who they presumably just buried for really kind of really odd reasons. But Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman, these backs just don't have enough juice to really kind of gouge defenses. So Lamar has been kind of forced to turn to vertical passing. He's been excellent at it. He leads the NFL in depth of target. But the Chargers are number one in the NFL by a wide margin against the deep ball. Just 4 of 22 passes against them on the season over 15 yards downfield have been completed. 18%, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So it's going to be kind of one of these things where I think people want to chase what they saw on Monday night, and Lamar's gotten so much steam this week through like he's the MVP now. He's been in the MVP conversation that I feel like it's just what the Chargers are designed to do on defense are going to take away what Hollywood Brown and what Lamar Jackson, how they've provided their fantasy points. Now, those players are good enough to get over on any defense, even a good one, but I think we might catch a little bit too much heat. And Hollywood Brown, his pricing is so cheap as well that I think it's going to tie in. And I think that those guys can end up being the kind of the fades of the week.
Yeah, and you know what? Our top stack tool, Alex, would suggest something similar. Very low leverage score for Baltimore, much higher ownership than the top projected or top stack probability. Chargers, on the other hand, very high leverage score. Of course, this is just one piece of the puzzle, but are you factoring that in for this week?
Yeah, I think Baltimore is always a really tough stack to pull off effectively because you can have Lamar have the big game you need, and then the receivers like don't get there. So usually what I'm trying to get with my stack is like an and one play, where I guess that's like a not really in a basketball sense, but where if these two receivers do well, then my quarterback's going to have a huge day. That's not something that works great with the Ravens because Lamar gets so many solo points and they're not like there isn't as high a correlation. In addition, I feel like Mark Andrews is going to be super high owned given he's been really performing huge this year so far. Compared to our projections, his average is way higher. So that does kind of scare me away a little bit off the Ravens to maybe some more pass heavy teams.
Yeah, a 45 fantasy point game will definitely do that.
Yeah.
Insane game from Mark Andrews last week. It really was. I mean, you're gonna. Let me, Rich, quickly because we got about 10 minutes left. Is there any? Do you think Bateman is involved with Sammy Watkins out, or is this kind of just one of those things where a 10-game slate, still a lot of games, we don't really need to play a guessing game here?
Yeah, I think it's just blind faith if you're going there because, you know, this is a kid that hasn't played, not just to start the season, but in the preseason at all. And remember, they had to activate him. He had to dress for this game or else he would have had to be placed on IR for the rest of the season. Now, Watkins being out does add a different wrinkle, but I do think we'll see some Devin Duvernay, kind of really sprinkled in here as well. So I think it's just a blind faith play. And like I said, the Chargers are just been taking away the deep ball. So like, what are we really chasing?
For sure. Avi, thanks for all the super chats. Says, I love Andrews on FanDuel, though they give up yards to tight ends. If you guys haven't checked out PrizePicks yet, today's a great week to do so because the one prop that I love to hit over there is the rushing touchdowns. And the reason is there's no juice ever. So like you have Derrick Henry at half a touchdown and all you need to do is take the over or under. He's minus 220 at other books to score this week. Same thing for Kareem Hunt, minus 150 at other books to score half a touchdown. And at that rate, I'm just going to take those all day long, particularly with Henry, who's on pace for 22 touchdowns and 480 carries. And that's not an exaggeration either. Right? Even across 16 games, he's on pace for like 460. It's just something nuts. But yeah, those are the ones I love to hit on PrizePicks. And I love the fact that if you use the promo code Awesemo, you'll get up to $100 first match deposit bonus when you sign up. There's no optimizers there, no mass entries, no sharks, none of that. All you're doing is picking 2, 3, 4, or 5 player lineups that can net up to 10 extra entry fee if you get up to 5 right. Now, you might say, well, yeah, I could just throw parlays in anywhere, right? Well, the one thing that's awesome about PrizePicks is if you were to get 3 out of 5 right, you still would get paid, right? 4 out of 5 right, you still get paid. So it's not a hit all 5 or lose. You can't. It's not like you hit 4 and then you just have a brutal beat in the Monday Night Football game and now you're out everything. That's not the case. No, it's if you hit 5, you're making good money. But if you hit 3 or 4, you're still looking at a decent day. So it's just straight player props. Throw them into a 2 to 5 person or player lineup. Over, under. You could do mixed sport entries as well. They have an insane amount of sports over there. I don't have time to rattle off every single sport, but if you're knowledgeable in more than one area, this is the place to be for sure. Download it in the App Store or the Google Play Store, or go to prizepicks.com and use our free NFL and MLB player props tool over at awesemo.com to help you make the best picks. All right. Alex, there's still a lot we haven't gotten to, so let's hit on some important stuff here. Like the Vikings and Panthers, Christian McCaffrey on the IR, Dalvin Cook's not in the injury report, but do you think he gets a full workload, or we see a similar split that we did 2 weeks ago with Alexander Mattison?
Yeah, he's always a guy that you have to worry that he's going to share touches a little bit. I mean, he missed last week and was limited the week before, so I don't see any way we can be like fully confident he's going to get 30 touches this week like you would want at his price point to take that GPP. That being said, I'm going to keep an eye out for beat writers to indicate if there is something different than what we're expecting there. I do feel like he doesn't stand out a ton over a lot of the cheaper players this week, which is the main thing that's kind of drawing me away from him.
Rich, one thing I wanted to ask you for this before we get done here is, what are you doing now? You do a ton of deep analysis with a lot of these players. How do you view the pass catchers for the Dallas Cowboys in a year where Dak is, and granted, they've had some favorable game scripts, but 20th in pass attempts. And while CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper have reasonable target shares north of 20%, it's just a much lower passing volume offense than it was last year, even though Dak's rate before he got hurt, pace was not sustainable. It is definitely down quite a bit. And they're using Dalton Schultz, 2 running backs. Like, what should we be doing with guys like CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper?
Yeah, it's real tough because no one's punched back on them is the main problem. I mean, they've thrown the ball just 26.8 times per game the past month. And if you look at their upcoming schedule, they've got the Patriots, they've got the Vikings, they've got the Broncos, they've got the Falcons. Like, who's punching back? Who's answering? Who's scoring 25, 30 points? Then maybe the Vikings can, but these rest of these teams, like, they're not going to stop them. And really, that's what we need. The one like out you might have, because if you're someone that drafted CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper and you've been kind of waiting for these blow up spots, and you kind of want some targets to kind of find their way to them, is that there's really just no way Dalton Schultz is going to double up these guys in targets over the course of the big picture of the season.
Right.
Dalton Schultz has 28% of team targets the past 3 weeks. And Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb really have really next to nothing. You just hope that swings back. But if you're invested in the Cowboys, like, the carnival just isn't going to be here. Like, we're not going to run into a lot of games where either one of those guys see a lot of 8 to 10 target games, just because they're throwing the ball 27 times per game. And there's no reason for them not to throw it 27 times per game, not only in the game scripts they're in, but how effectively they run their offense with these 2 backs. So you look at their upcoming schedule, like, do we think New England's going to score 24 or more on them this week? It's really tough to say that. It's really tough to kind of to back that. So, I mean, we're going to really need to look at, like, maybe week 11 when they face the Chiefs, that we get some of that old carnival Cowboys games back into our lives.
That's what it feels like at this point. And I have some hesitation going to this one for sure, just based on volume. Alex, do you want to get to the Rams with the 28 and 28.75 implied total here. 8-point favorites on the road against the Giants. That line has come down considerably since Daniel Jones is expected to play.
Yeah, I think the Rams are pretty interesting. They're a very pass-heavy team so far this year. So that definitely makes me want to stack it up. And they got several options that you can choose from. I mean, the best ones are Cobb. He's been phenomenal. And then Woods had that huge game that kind of bolstered our confidence in him recently. So those are great options. Darrell Henderson catches passes and gets the bulk of the carries, so he's a great option for a team stack. And then Van Jefferson and Tyler Higbee, a little bit expensive compared to where I'd want them, but they have some potential.
All right, Rich, we got about 3 minutes. We'll get to our favorite props, our top fade, our top pivot of the week. But do you look to Devontae Booker this week, given that he's probably going to see an insane amount of volume on a bad team? And how interested are you in this Rams offense, particularly through or on the ground and the air, as a matter of fact?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get there with Booker. The touches are there, but there's just so many guys that that are orbiting him in price. And like you said, the bad matchup, the lower implied team total, it's really hard for me to be real excited about him. Maybe I'll regret that, but I don't know if I've ever regretted not being in on Devontae Booker. But we'll see. definitely the Rams side though. You can bank on them to be able to score points against this Giants defense. Matthew Stafford's been so hot, and he's another guy that is actually due a little bit of more touchdown regression as well because he's been so bad inside the 10-yard line. You know, it's crazy that Stafford's been so good, but he's 3 of 12 passing inside the 10-yard line, 25th out of 29 quarterbacks to throw 5 more passes in that area of the field. So, I mean, I think we'll start to see him throw a little more touchdowns because his fantasy numbers haven't gotten there because the high touchdown totals haven't come along. So I think he'll regress in that area as well. And we'll start to see him have a game where he has another 3 or 4 passing touchdowns. But yeah, listen, we love the Rams every week.
Jordan, throw this in the chat if you don't mind. Cross-check the all caps, all one word. Get you the Awesemo Plus NHL package for $3 for the week. I know our boy shipped my money using our projections and tools yesterday. Adam Scher, he just took down a cool 7,500. Jake Hari continually crushing it on that. I actually been playing some NHL lately, and it's a lot of fun, especially with the tools we have. If you want to get everything on the site, every single sport, you want to test it out for a week, Awesemo Plus Platinum, all of these tools built, created, used by this man right here, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Use the promo code on the contrary, all caps, all one word, get you 25% off your first week. That's everything on the site, all of the tools we talk about. So check all of that out. Jordan will throw it in chat. Go to awesemo.com/join and use those promo codes at checkout. All right, fellas, let's do this. Top fade, top pivot of the week. Hit me with both of them, Alex.
So my top fade, I guess it's Lamar Jackson, and it feels horrible to fade the top player at the position. I mean, he's been great this year so far, but it's more for game theory reasons, like I was referencing earlier, where I just don't feel as confident that if I take Lamar, I'm going to be able to pick the right other players to go with him. So for that reason, I'm looking towards some more pass-heavy players at the quarterback position, and I guess there's so many good ones, but the top stacks is free this week, so I'm pulling that up to help me find the leverage stack to cite here. I guess the Chargers, it looks like they have the 5th highest top stack percentage, and it looks like the team stack isn't super highly owned, so that could be a good one.
How about you, Rich?
Yeah, I think the Ravens' deep passing game is the fade. Chasing Hollywood and Lamar from Monday night. I was ready to kind of really pump up Keenan Allen, but he's going to get there naturally now because of Mike Williams news. So that's kind of a bummer because you figure a guy just getting targeted that much is going to come along for the ride eventually. All the touchdowns don't go to Eckler and Big Mike. So I mean, I don't know where he's going to land at, but I do like Keenan Allen a lot this week if you can get him in.
All right, and favorite bet for the week, Rich? What do you got?
My favorite bet of the week is the Colts and Texans over. We didn't really talk about this game, but I think it's actually a really intriguing DFS game as well.
Take a second to do so, actually, because I just spoke with Chris, one of our producers, had asked us to get out by 2:30, but It looks like he was talking about next week. So if you wanted to hit on Houston Indy, go for it. If you want to take a minute for that, that's cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is a game that definitely gets over that 42.5. I mean, you look at so right now the Texans blitz at the lowest rate in the NFL, and they're lowest in the NFL in pressure rate. They've never even blitzed on third down yet this season. Not one third down defensive play have they blitzed through 5 weeks. And why you say that's a big deal? Well, Carson Wentz and the Colts have faced 5 of the 12 blitz heaviest teams in the NFL. Every team they face blitzes at a higher rate than above blitz rate average in the NFL. And Carson Wentz under pressure versus kept clean has been just absolutely night and day so far this season. He's got a positive EPA, 54% success rate, 7.7 yards per attempt when kept clean, negative 0.25 EPA, 32% success rate, and 4.8 yards per attempt when under pressure so far this season. The Colts obviously have Jonathan Taylor in their back pocket as well, and 30% of the fantasy points allowed by Houston have come via rushing, which is the highest rate in the NFL. The Colts actually also have a pretty high implied team total that are comparable to a lot of these teams we talked about. It's the same as the Browns so far this season. Actually, the Browns probably came down this little bit because the total came down. And then the Houston side, we kind of seen that, we've seen Brandon Cooks have some big games before already this season, and Davis Mills at least showed us some capability to be functional. I think the Colts definitely score 30 here, so you really only need 14 from the 14 in the area.
Okay.
Side. So, I mean, I like this game. I think there's stacking purposes. I wish T.Y. wasn't coming back so we could really jam on this Michael Pittman pricing, but I like this game to be kind of one of the sneaky games that goes over this low total that is implied.
I think Pittman's still going to rip. The guy's amazing, man. I love Michael Pittman. I'm all about it. Alex, I'm going straight back to the well with betting the under on a backup running back. I got off the schneid finally on Thursday, and the starting running back didn't get hurt when I bet the under on the backup. Kenny Gainwell under 14.5 yards. Boom. Didn't even see a carry. Let's go Larry Roundtree under 15.5 yards. He did not see an offensive snap last game at all. I understand that game was a little bit unique, but give me this all day long. And on Odds Shopper, if you go to our Shop NFL tab, we have this with an extraordinarily high expected win rate. I love it. We're projecting him way lower than that. So am I. Under 15.5 rushing yards, Larry Roundtree. The best bet is over at FanDuel, according to Odds Shopper as well. That's totally free too, oddshopper.com. All right, close us out, Alex. What do you got?
Looking at Tua Tagovailoa over 222 passing yards. He's averaged 6.9 over a limited sample so far this year per attempt. But the real key here is Miami has been the 4th highest pass volume in the NFL this year at 66% of plays. But they're facing Jacksonville that is very bad versus the pass. So I just I think there's a ton of outs here. We have it at a ridiculous ROI, and I think it's a great bet.
Beautiful. And hey, I only asked once. Thanks for getting us above 100 like mark. We got over 500 watching right now. You didn't hit that thumbs up though. On your way out, maybe tap that. Subscribe to the channel too, and join it if you want to. Get the custom emojis, the badges, all of that fun stuff. And like Shamwell said, some shout outs as well, even if you have to ask for them. Thanks as always for hanging out. Follow Rich Hribar at Lord Reeves, and check out everything at Sharp Football Analysis. Anything else you got going on, Rich, before we go?
No, sharpfootballanalysis.com. Check out, I break down all these games with all the stats and metrics that you hear me ramble on about. So, I mean, check out my work there. And, I just great to have you, my yearly appearance, come here and check in with you guys.
Yeah, man. We'll see you next October. Alex is at Awesemo DFS on Twitter, me at Loughy_D, Awesemo at Awesemo_com. Remember, cross-check, all caps, all one word, $3 for the entire week of Awesemo plus NHL, or on the contrary, for everything on the site for the week, 25% off. We'll catch you back here next week for week 7 on the contrary, and we'll see you back here tomorrow for the 4-hour live stream all the way up till lock. Peace.